galaxy was old. It was settled, mapped, and categorized. For 10,000 years, the Galactic Concordat had presided over a golden age of stagnation, where every hyperlane was known, and every habitable world was allocated with bureaucratic precision. The elder races, the logic-driven Zani, the photosynthesis-based Floran, and the silicon-skinned Lithos, had calculated the exact limits of safe expansion. They drew a line on the galactic map, a jagged border of red holographic warnings, and declared that beyond this point, there was nothing but entropy and death. They called it the Terminus. It was where the starlight grew thin, and the laws of physics, while not broken, became uncomfortably flexible. No ship that entered the Terminus had ever returned. It was the edge of the known, the shoreline of a dark and infinite ocean. Then came humanity. They arrived late to the galactic stage, stumbling out of their gravity well with fusion drives that leaked radiation and hulls held together by welds and optimism. They were loud, messy, and disturbingly contradictory. They were a species that would bomb their own cities one decade and build monuments to peace the next. They terrified the Concordat, not because of their weapons, which were primitive projectile throwers, but because of their psychology. Humans did not understand the concept of a limit. When the humans petitioned the Concordat for permission to explore the Terminus, the council hall fell silent. The High Counselor, a Zani with skin like polished obsidian, had explained the probability of survival. It was 0. He had shown them the graveyard of data, the distress beacons that screamed into the void until their batteries died. He expected the humans to bow, to tremble, and to return to their allocated sector. Instead, the human representative, a woman named Ambassador Reyes, with gray streaks in her hair and eyes that looked far too tired for her age, had simply smiled. She said that on Earth, they had a saying about maps with blank spaces. She said, "Here be dragons." And then she said that humans had a long history of hunting dragons. 6 months later, the Concordat observation vessel, Silent Vigil, sat in stationary orbit at the very edge of the Terminus. High Observer Kyle, a Zani of impeccable standing, stood on the bridge, his 4 optical sensors fixed on the main view screen. Beside him was the human vessel. It was named the Blue Horizon. It was not elegant. It did not have the sweeping organic curves of a Floran cruiser or the geometric perfection of a Zani dreadnought. It was a brick, a massive, heavily armored slab of titanium and composite alloys, bristling with sensor arrays and oversized thrusters. It looked like someone had strapped an engine to a skyscraper and pointed it at God. Kale adjusted his ceremonial robes, his mandibles clicking in agitation. He turned to the holographic display where Captain Elias Thorne of the Blue Horizon was waiting. Thorne looked relaxed, sitting in a command chair that looked like it had been reupholstered 3 times. He was holding a ceramic mug that steamed in the recycled air. Kyle spoke into the comms, reminding the captain for the final time that this was a suicide mission. He reiterated that the Concordat would not send rescue parties. He listed the actuarial tables regarding hull stress in the Terminus zone. Thorne took a sip from his mug. He looked at the view screen, past Kale, and into the swirling, bruised purple clouds of the Terminus Nebula. He said that he appreciated the concern, but they weren't going in because it was safe. They were going in because no one else would. He cut the transmission with a polite nod. The Blue Horizon's engines flared. They weren't the silent, gravity-ripple drives of the Concordat. They were fusion torches. They roared with the fury of a contained sun, spewing blue-white fire miles long. The human ship shuddered, broke the stationary hold, and accelerated. Kyle watched the telemetry. The human ship crossed the red line. It punched through the invisible barrier of safety and vanished into the interference of the terminus. The sensors on the silent vigil screamed as they lost the lock. Kyle recorded the time of death in the official log. He prepared to turn his ship around. But the blue horizon was not dead. Inside the human ship, the air was vibrating. It was a low, thrumming frequency that rattled the teeth of every crew member. On the bridge, Captain Thorne gripped the armrests of his chair. The view screen was a kaleidoscope of static and impossible colors. The terminus wasn't just empty space. It was a region of high-dimensional turbulence, a storm of gravitational shear that wanted to tear the ship apart at the molecular level. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, the navigation officer, shouted over the roar of the hull stress alarms. She reported that the navigational computer was throwing errors. The stars weren't where they were supposed to be. The local physics were shifting. Gravity was fluctuating by 3% every 10 seconds. Thorne didn't panic. He ordered the computer to be taken offline. He told Chen to fly by instrument raw data and visual confirmation. This was the human difference. A Zani pilot would have frozen as their automated systems failed, unable to process data that didn't fit the algorithm. A human pilot just cursed, switched to manual, and treated the laws of physics as a suggestion rather than a rule. They pushed deeper. Hours turned into days. The blue horizon was battered. Micrometeoroids moving at relativistic speeds pitted the armor. Radiation spikes forced the crew to sleep in rotational shifts in the shielded core. But they kept going. On the third day, they found the reason for the silence. It wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was a net. Sensors picked up a lattice of energy signatures ahead. As the blue horizon cleared a dense nebula cloud, the crew saw them. They were immense structures, octahedrons of black metal the size of moons, floating in a perfect geometric grid. They were ancient, older than the Concordat, older perhaps than humanity's home sun. Between them crackled a field of energy that dampened hyperdrives and scrambled communications. This was the Great Filter, the barrier that kept civilizations in their cradle, and something was guarding it. Alert sirens wailed, a different pitch than the environmental alarms. Tactical Officer Vance barked out the contact. Multiple bogies, fast movers, launching from the octahedron stations. They looked like shards of obsidian, sleek, angular, and moving with a synchronized perfection that betrayed their artificial nature. Thorne watched the tactical plot. There were hundreds of them. Drones. Automated defense systems left behind by some paranoid precursor race to ensure that the younger species never left the playground. The Concordat would have analyzed the odds, realized they were outnumbered 500 to 1, and surrendered, hoping for a quick death. Thorne keyed the ship-wide intercom. His voice was calm, the voice of a man who had already decided that if he was going to die, he was going to make it expensive for the enemy. He told the crew that they had found the dragon. Now it was time to show it some teeth. The blue horizon did not have the elegant energy lances of the elves or the antimatter beams of the lithos. It had kinetic artillery, massive rail guns running the length of the ship, designed to accelerate tungsten slugs to a fraction of the speed of light. The drone swarm closed in. They fired beams of coherent plasma, searing the blue horizon's shields. The hull groaned. Sparks showered from the overhead consoles on the bridge. Thorne waited. He let them get close. He needed them bunched up. At 5,000 kilometers, he gave the order to fire. The ship bucked. The main railguns thundered, a sound that traveled through the ship's frame rather than the air. Twin slugs, each weighing 10 tons, slammed into the lead formation of drones. There were no shields that could stop a kinetic impact of that magnitude. The lead drones didn't just explode, they atomized. The shockwave of debris shredded the drones behind them. But there were too many. The swarm adjusted, splitting like a school of fish, swirling around the heavy firing arcs of the human ship. They raked the Blue Horizon's flanks. Armor plating melted. Decompression alarms screamed in the lower decks. Chief Engineer O'Malley called from the engine room. His voice was ragged. He reported that the coolant flush was jammed. The fusion core was overheating. If they kept the main drive at combat power, they would melt down in 10 minutes. Thorne looked at the tactical map. They were surrounded. The moon-sized stations were powering up something massive, a weapon capable of cracking a planet. This was the moment the Concordat warned them about. The logical end, the insurmountable variable. Thorne looked at Chen. He asked if she could plot a trajectory through the center of the station grid. Chen looked at him like he was insane. She explained that the gravitational shear between the stations would tear the ship apart. It was a meat grinder. Thorne grinned. It was a cold, sharp expression. He said that if it was a meat grinder for them, it was a meat grinder for the drones too. And the drones were programmed to avoid it. They were programmed for self-preservation and efficiency. Humans were not. He ordered the helm to hard to port. He ordered O'Malley to disable the safety limiters on the drive. All of them. The Blue Horizon pivoted, its maneuvering thrusters firing frantically. It didn't turn away from the enemy. It turned directly toward the largest concentration of the anomaly, the center of the energy web where the gravity was crushing space itself. The drone swarm hesitated. Their logic processors analyzed the human vector. It computed as an error. The target was flying into a suicide zone. The drones paused, recalibrating, trying to predict the abort trajectory. But there was no abort. Thorne pushed the throttle to the stops. The Blue Horizon screamed. The frame groaned so loud, it sounded like a dying beast. Bolts popped from the bulkheads. In the engine room, O'Malley and his team were spraying manual coolant hoses onto the reactor housing, working in environment suits as the temperature climbed into the red. The ship plunged into the gravity well. The artificial gravity failed. The crew floated in their restraints, blood pounding in their heads. Outside, the universe bent. Light smeared into streaks. The drone swarm, realizing too late that the prey wasn't stopping, tried to pursue. But they were machines. They were governed by safety parameters. As they entered the shear zone, their guidance systems fought the turbulence. They tried to correct, to stabilize. The Blue Horizon didn't try to stabilize. Chen fought the stick, riding the gravitational waves like a surfer on a tsunami. She didn't fight the chaos. She used it. She whipped the ship around the gravity well of the nearest station, using the crushing force to slingshot them forward. The drones weren't so lucky. Hundreds of them were caught in the shear. They collided with each other, or were simply crushed flat by the tidal forces. The perfect mathematical swarm was reduced to a cloud of sparking scrap metal. They were through the first line, but the station, the massive octahedron, was directly ahead. Its main weapon was glowing, a terrible eye of red light gathering energy to vaporize them. Thorne saw the charge building. They couldn't dodge it. They were too close, and the gravity well had them locked in a trajectory. He opened a channel to engineering. He didn't ask for more power. He asked for the impossible. He asked O'Malley to dump the core. Not shut it down. Dump it. Eject the unstable fusion plasma directly out of the forward maintenance vents. O'Malley laughed. It was a hysterical sound. He said it would be the world's biggest flamethrower. Thorn confirmed. As the station fired its main beam, the blue horizon vented its plasma. A blinding jet of superheated energetic matter erupted from the ship's nose, spreading out into a cone of chaotic energy. The alien beam hit the plasma cloud. Physics took a holiday. The coherent beam shattered, refracting through the plasma, blooming into a wild storm of energy that washed back over the station. The station's shields were designed to stop impacts and lasers, not a point-blank fusion bath mixed with its own refracted weapon fire. Overloads cascaded across the alien station's surface. The black metal buckled. Explosions chained along the grid. The weapon array detonated, taking a quarter of the station with it. The backlash knocked the entire energy grid offline. The dampening field flickered and died. The blue horizon shot out the other side of the grid, trailing smoke, leaking atmosphere, its hull scorched black, but alive. Silence returned to the bridge. The roar of the engines had faded to a ragged idle. The tactical display cleared. The drones were dead or drifting. The stations were dark. Thorn wiped a line of blood from his nose. He checked the status board. Casualty reports were coming in. Broken bones, radiation burns, hull breaches. But the ship held. He looked at the communications officer. He told him to send a message. Back at the edge of the terminus, aboard the silent Vigil, High Observer Kale was composing the final eulogy for the human expedition. He had seen the energy spikes. He had detected the massive gravitational distortions. Nothing survived that. Then, the comms panel lit up. It wasn't a distress signal. It was a broadband transmission, unencrypted, blasting on every frequency. It was audio only. First, there was static. Then the sound of laughter. Tired, manic, triumphant laughter. And then, Captain Thorn's voice, sounding like he had gargled gravel. Concordat Control, this is the Blue Horizon. We have cleared the obstruction. The road is open. We are proceeding to secondary survey coordinates. And send a tow truck. We might need a ride home in a few months. Kale stared at the console. His optical sensors widened. The telemetry came through a moment later. The red wall on the holographic map, the Here Be Dragons line, turned green. The interference was gone. The humans hadn't just survived. They had broken the door down. The video feed flickered to life. It showed the view from the Blue Horizon's forward cameras. Beyond the destroyed stations, beyond the darkness of the terminus, lay the Blue Horizon. A sea of new stars, dense clusters of resource-rich systems, and nebulae glowing with potential. It was a pristine frontier, untouched for eons. It was enough space to house the galaxy's population 10 times over. Kyle sat back in his command pod. He looked at the humans on his screen. They were bleeding. Their ship was a wreck. They looked exhausted. But their eyes, they were burning with a hunger that the elder races had lost a millennia ago. He realized then why the humans terrified the Council. It wasn't their violence. It was their resilience. The universe threw its worst at them, physics, logic, ancient machines of death. And humanity just shrugged, spat out a tooth, and kept walking. Kyle opened a channel to the High Council. He didn't use the standard diplomatic protocols. He simply forwarded the image of the new frontier and added a personal note. "The humans have opened the sky," he dictated. "I suggest we follow them, because if we don't, they will leave us behind." Deep in the void, the Blue Horizon limped forward. In the mess hall, someone broke out a guitar. In the medical bay, they were stitching up wounds and telling stories about who shook the most. In engineering, O'Malley was patting the cooling fusion core like a good dog. Captain Thorne looked out at the infinite stars ahead. He didn't know what was out there. There might be more machines. There might be hostile empires. There might be nothing but dust. But it was unknown. And that was all that mattered. He leaned back, closed his eyes for a moment, and whispered to the darkness. "Humanity," he said. "Fuck yeah." The ship's thrusters flared one more time, a defiant spark against the eternal night, sailing past the horizon and into the history books.